Alright, so we're back at it with a recap and discussion of Season 2, Episode 4 of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. Paid the Toll. RAQ. So the fourth episode begins with RAQ's expansion, or attempted expansion, into New Jersey. We see a truck being loaded up with quite a bit of crack and being driven into Newark, New Jersey. Now, I picked it up once, like, the guy started coming down the street. Well, part of it is that our perspective is different, right? You have the guy in the truck, there's another one standing on the corner while the truck comes down the street. And it appears that the guy in the street has a sawn-off shotgun in his right hand. But the driver, like, he can't see that. He just sees his left hand, his left side. So he stopped at the light. The guy steps off the curb while the light is green. And now, me personally, I think there's an issue, right? Because it's just one person in the truck driving. Now, granted, Jersey isn't that far from New York, so even if he had to drive there or something like that, might not be an issue, but he might have to use the bathroom or something like that. It's a sizable amount of drugs. Anything goes wrong, he has no backup. So I thought it was taking a risk sending this guy into Jersey by himself. So, it's not really clear how you would identify this truck amongst all the others as being the one bringing drugs into the city. But either way, the guy steps off the curb, takes a knee, causing the driver to stop the truck. And this while the light is green. Personally watching, I thought maybe the guy might have floored it, but instead the driver, I guess being a somewhat decent person, stops and someone else takes control of the truck, right? Like he's robbed. In the very next scene, we see that RAQ is out on what seems to be a date, right? Because it doesn't look like a business meeting because it's like a little too comfortable with Cartier Farid. And so they're at what appears to be his art gallery. He's talking to her about art, and you can kind of see some of RAQ's limitations as far as her experiences. Not so much knowledge, because I think she's smart, but it seems like she probably hasn't spent much time outside of the south side of Jamaica, Queens. She admits that she doesn't really know anything about art, right? And so thinks a lot of it is nonsense, but at least she's like open to learning about it, right? Or at least to some degree. So introducing the two of them last episode wasn't just by happenstance, and I kind of picked up on it, right? These two. Not for the characters, but rather that something was going to come from these two meeting, especially because we see this season like going back to, I think it was the second episode where the rats were eating RAQ's money, right, at the back of the bodega. Juliana suggested that she do something with it. And I think it's telling because up to this point, RAQ at this point has been selling drugs for like maybe 5-6 years. And here it is, it seems like maybe they weren't making as much money before as they are now, so it's just a lot of cash, but it's unclear what exactly she's been doing with her money or what she was doing with her money before. So maybe it might be a problem of how to get such a large quantity of money clean. So we see in the second episode that she started looking at real estate, and here she is now speaking to Cartier. Which kind of piqued my interest, right? I was concerned that they might try to make this into a romantic relationship. I'm not here for that at all. But at the very least, it seems there might be like a business relationship. I think he's probably interested in RAQ, right? She's incredibly problematic, but also an equally beautiful woman. So he's definitely interested. And so we see that like they walk around and whatnot, they're talking. And so I remember his character as Hollywood on Queen Sugar, and I actually liked his personality there, right? I liked him with the aunt who he was dating. But just from the very beginning, even his dealings with Lou, I just did not like him. He doesn't even, like, hustler isn't the word. Smarmy is more accurate, right? I don't particularly trust this guy. He's probably ruthless, but RAQ is ruthless. But beyond that, I just feel like he's full of it. There's just something about him I just do not like and did not like from the beginning. Him talking to RAQ, not so much like sweet talking her or anything like that, but I just wasn't digging it. He's a try-hard, like with his Shakespeare last episode, just way too extra. And this is in contrast to Symphony, who is uncool and nerdy, but unapologetically himself with seemingly no ulterior motives. I just don't like this guy. I feel like Symphony would motivate RAQ to leave the drug business, while Cartier will pull her in deeper. I think he's digging her, like, romantically, but I hope that interest is not mutual. So Rock is a quick study. They're walking through the gallery. He's talking to her about art. She's trying to figure out his angle. She's looked into him. He's well-spoken. He knows about art, but she's aware of his background and knows he's not like some silver spoon dude. He's from Fort Greene, Brooklyn, which I lived in for a few years. And she pulls his card on that, right? And so with that, they start speaking more honestly with each other. Going back to when he was originally introduced, it's explained that he's into all kinds of stuff, not just street business, but also legitimate businesses. And so with that, Rock picks up on it that he uses the art gallery to launder his money. We know that Rock has all kinds of drama in her business. A part of this is that she has large amounts of cash that she seemingly doesn't know what to do with. And so it's like she's making all of this money, but it's just sitting there because she doesn't really have a plan for how to get it clean. So later on, we see Rock is in the Baisley apartment spraying air freshener. Now, I've been giving Marvin props this season for his growth, but that stupid man putting the would-be rapist building inspector in the wall, like that's what's causing the spell. So Marvin doesn't even have to be in a room to create hilarious situations. I broke out laughing when I realized that was coming back into play. Because I was like, why would you think to put this man in the wall? That is not a good idea. So the other Thomas siblings join Rock at the Baisley apartment to discuss like the issue in Jersey, right, which they found out about now. And Marvin, before they start talking, pretty much gives Kanan the Uncle Phil into the bedroom. This while everyone is wondering what the hell is that smell. Kanan, being the problem child that he is, goes snooping to figure out where the smell is coming from and finds some sneaker boxes, at least one of which contains cash. For reasons that only make sense to him, he removes one of the bundled stacks of bills. This is now twice that Kanan has stolen from Rock. If you remember the previous episode, he stole a package of drugs, and now he's stealing actual money. Terrible stuff. As Luke points out, I don't understand how you move into a new area without trying to figure out who the players are and what's going on. Rock instead just rushes in. It kind of goes back to the first episode of the series where her and Unique had problems in part because she just took over some corners without having a conversation with him. But at least that was the south side of Jamaica, Queens, where she's familiar, at least in passing, with the other players. She doesn't know the people out in Jersey, nor has she done any recon. So to just rush in is irresponsible and honestly kind of unbelievable. And so, as I said in the last episode, Unique still being on the show means that he's still a problem for Rock. I think he's just playing the long game. Having learned her lesson, Rock now has security posted up in Juliana's bodega. But again, he's all out in the open. Anyone coming into the store might wonder, why is this random guy just sitting there? What is he guarding? I mean, move the stash to someplace more discreet where random people aren't just walking in and out. Unique walks in and the new security guy doesn't even make a move. Unique comes in to taunt Juliana, pretty much just playing mind games with her, letting her know that despite this guy sitting there, he can come and go as he pleases, so she can get touched at any time. To make matters worse, when he walks out the store, we see Warrell parked across the street, and the two of them are now back to chatting it up. World of problems. If Juliana goes to her cousin, there's a chance that he'd handle Unique, but that might bring problems in his dealings with Rock, because Rock put his cousin at risk, and he might go back to questioning her ability to manage her business. Rock is almost back to where she was last season, but with several of her allies falling by the wayside. The meeting with the Italians doesn't go according to plans. Essentially, it's like a shakedown, really. You know, you're going to pay a tax for doing business here, and things kind of go left. The situation also shows that there's a growing breach between Lou and Rock. Lou is actually kind of apologetic as he tries to smooth things over with the Italians. Going back to the first episode in the first season, we see he pretty much did this as well when Rock and Tony met and didn't hit it off. He was willing to smile and diffuse the situation while Rock wasn't willing to give an inch once she and Tony got started. The Italian boss, Sal Boselli, is condescending towards the Thomases, and Rock in turn aggressively rejects his offer, though he does admit to having some respect for her chutzpah. I didn't notice it, but someone pointed out that the guy who hands Lou the paper is actually the guy Unique saved in prison. So it kind of goes back to this thing of when you start out on your knees, you kind of stay there. And so Rock's thing is operating from a position of power. I think that maybe had the Italian guy approached it differently, it could have been a different conversation, given that she at least met with them. But Boselli's henchman, like he hands Lou a paper, and with like the cut that they want, and Lou kind of interjects his opinion, disagreeing with RAQ, while usually he lets her do the talking. So she walks away from the meeting because she's not trying to hear what the Italians are talking about, especially not in that tone. And as they walk away, she gives Lou the blues because he's questioning her in front of these Italians, or at least that's the way that she sees it. Marvin is kind of down for whatever, though Lou says Marvin, in trying to make amends with RAQ, is kind of going along to get along with some of the stuff that she's doing. That's possible, but I think right now he's doing things the right way. Where we saw in the previous episode, he questioned RAQ about this move to Jersey, but this was while there was only one other person in the room, whereas Lou questioned her in front of the Italians, which isn't a good look, as it shows division in their ranks and points to the mounting tension between them. It's like, look how quickly things changed from just last season, and their role is just a couple of months. So from the start, I wondered how exactly the Italians knew which truck was carrying RAQ's drugs without some kind of information from someone on the inside. But we see Unique talk to Worrell, and Worrell was the one that gave her the idea to expand into Jersey. When Burke, ever being the busybody that she is, shows up to talk to Unique about Howard's shooting, he's talking to someone on the phone. It's unclear who exactly, but he gives them info about how RAQ is going to move the next shipment to Jersey, and his info matches what RAQ says about no more trucks, but using short buses instead. I think Worrell is the one giving info to Unique, and he's passing along the info to the Italian guy he met in prison. I understand why RAQ is expanding into Jersey, but how she's doing it doesn't make sense. She seems to be spiraling this season, as her behavior is very much at odds with how she conducted herself last season. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. RAQ's problem is that she hit back at Howard and Unique last season, but didn't completely destroy them. She then granted them grace rather than immediately taking them both out when they were back in the open. They're now causing bigger problems than before, or bigger threats than before. It keeps going back to the narration from the first episode about the greatest mistake that people make is that in victory, they kick their feet up and celebrate too early. She jumped at the chance to bring Kanan back home and was so wrapped up in her baby's return that she took her eyes off her business. She should have left Kanan where he was and taken the opportunity to personally and permanently get rid of Howard and Unique. Before watching this episode, I saw a photo of RAQ smiling ear to ear while standing next to Symphony. I got so excited as her relationship with Symphony last season was one of my favorite things about her character and the show. When he showed up while RAQ was looking at a house, I was overjoyed at the possibility of them maybe getting back together. It's like they look like a young couple starting their life together. They're so cute together. Yet, he's got some questions. Chiefly, why did RAQ call him? She plays it off as, with him being into urban planning, he probably knows about architecture and can offer some advice in interior design. It's like, girl, if you don't stop. This season is an exercise in a bunch of stuff RAQ knows nothing about. Why would you put carpet in the dining room? Why would you rip out hardwood floors to put carpet when you can just lay the carpet over it? I mean, honestly, just hire a decorator because... So he offers her some advice, right? The more the season goes on, the more clear it becomes that RAQ is a bit lost and out of her depth, right? Which goes back to that constellation explanation from the show's very first episode about the woman struggling to hold on and remain on top of the world. She's got some nice outfits and is smart in a way, but doesn't seem to know much about anything outside of a very limited scope. Like, what does RAQ do for fun? If Kanan isn't around and she's not doing something related to dealing drugs, what exactly does she do with her time? But that speaks to her life, where it sounds like, she's from the projects, had a problematic childhood, had a baby in her mid-teens, and got involved with drug dealers / dealing drugs. Her life has been incredibly limited, and maybe that's part of why she's going so hard right now. Like, this is all she really knows. RAQ is definitely still interested in Symphony, and it seems that he might still be interested in her. Once again, he places his hand in her waist, which comes across as incredibly intimate. And like I said, when they met in the first episode of this season, that is, I think that conversation would have gone a lot differently if Kanan wasn't there, though it wouldn't have solved all their problems. Here, with the two of them alone, they can speak more honestly and openly with each other. So he has questions. It seems like what's bothering him is he felt at the time he didn't need to know, but realizes that he actually does want to know what exactly went down the night when she had him drive Kanan out of town. She doesn't go into detail, but pretty much states the cops were on one, and she did what she needed to protect her son. It's kind of surprising because she easily lies to everyone else, but here she comes pretty close to telling the truth, which is like a big thing for RAQ. He's the one person in her life that she's actually fairly honest and open with. She shares her inner thoughts and plans with him while she shields them from everyone else. And that's one of the things that I miss about having him on the show. So far this season, she's been kind of flat and one-dimensional, but here you see that warm part of her that's been missing due to her distance from Kanan and Symphony. In part, it's because you haven't seen her having much interaction with those two, right? You need RAQ interacting with them and like these other characters to see those different facets of her character. Without it, she feels like your typical drug dealer. That complexity and vulnerability is the thing that made her so refreshing in the first season. Her not just being one thing. I feel like RAQ wanted to pause things with Symphony, or rather to put him to the side for a minute while she dealt with Lou being in a fire attack. So far this season, she's been very one track, very focused on the business, and it's like other parts of her character being neglected. But I think what they're trying to do with that story is that it's like showing that last season, she felt like she kind of took her eye off the ball and it led to problems, right? I thought back to the vision she shared with him last season about her future life out of the drug business or removed from it. I was hoping that she would take the time to apologize to him and ask him to try to work things out. He seems apprehensive, but she's openly happy to see him and spend even a little time with him. I think if she'd pushed, he probably would have given in. But the writers were seemingly given false hope, right? RAQ has decided that she's going to buy this house and she's excited. In the midst of everything she has going on, this is like a happy moment. She tells the agent to put in an offer and the agent departs, leaving RAQ and Symphony alone. All things considered, he seems happy for her in general, but not really happy to be there. He admits that he still cares about her and Kanan, but he can't be a part of her life. He doesn't want to continue with the back and forth of her pushing him away only to pull him back. It's kind of heartbreaking in a way. She touched on this way back in the first episode of the first season when they went out on their first date. RAQ explained that a lot of guys can't really deal with her lifestyle. I think Symphony could deal with her shady business to a degree, but her wanting to keep him at a distance and be with him when she wants to be with him were like too much. Her way of coming in way too hot or ending things brutally were too much, and he deserves better than that. So good on him for knowing his worth, right? RAQ needs to come correct or leave that man alone. All this leave me alone, but then I'll call and expect you to come running when I need you business is selfish. While I want them to be together, that's only under the right conditions, primarily that RAQ has to stop being a jerk to Symphony. But when Symphony asked her to stop calling him, the look on her face, you could see that she was crushed. And I mean, damn, it hurt my feelings too. That, she's probably thinking, I'm going to get this house, I'm going to get my man back, we're going to get married, have more kids, be together, and I can finally live this life that I've been dreaming about, that I've been sacrificing for. And it's like, he's just not willing to wait for her. I didn't think he'd fully forgiven her, but rather that they'd need to have some serious conversations. But he asked her to shut it all the way down. In a sense, he was civil, even nice about the situation, but it shows that Symphony is no simp. He's not a punk either, right? He's a nice guy, but he most certainly does have a backbone, as he first showed it to her when she was unnecessarily rude to him at the hospital. It's related back to the first season's third episode, right? When he asked her what this relationship was to her and where she saw things going. RAQ told him that she liked his life being so different from her own because being with him felt like a vacation, a break from her life. I got that. But it also meant that she compartmentalized him and would pick him up and put him down as she pleased. Meanwhile, he wanted to be a fixture in her life. I wasn't expecting things to work out that way. And, to work out this way with him, choosing to step off, and she wasn't either. Kanan has questions and RAQ continues to lie like a rug instead of giving him honest answers. This, as of his conversation last episode with Howard, where he told him that he was his dad and whatnot. He spent all of his life up to this point with RAQ telling him that DEF CON is his father. We as the audience know this isn't true, but Howard put it across to him in a way that's making him question things despite his years, his history with RAQ. He's not 100% there in believing Howard, but he's trying to verify, right? There's enough questions there to make him feel like he needs needs to reach out and kind of try to figure this out for himself. It's telling that thus far, like, he spoke to RAQ about the situation with Howard previously, but since then, at least from what we see as the audience, like, they haven't spoken about it further. But here we see that he's out on his own trying to verify. And so with that, he goes to see Vernon Stark, which is Def Con's brother. I find it kind of telling, right? It's stated on the show that Def Con went to prison, but it's unclear if he ever got back out. I had the sense that he died because he just seemed to, like, not be around at all and hasn't been for some time. It seems like Kanan didn't know him at all. I don't know how this kind of stuff works with someone in prison, but I just assumed that at least at some point in time, even if he might have been a little kid, that RAQ would have taken Kanan to see him, like, you know, at least once or twice. But we get the sense here that Kanan knows nothing about this man, nothing beyond, like, what he's heard about him from her. Like, he doesn't know him, hasn't interacted with him. So we see here he goes to prison to meet Vernon Stark, his supposed uncle, and Vernon doesn't even recognize him. So obviously he hasn't been going to jail to visit his uncle either. The exchange is just, I don't know, maybe him being like a street dude. Vernon sounds like really rough. It's unclear if he knew Def Con was actually gay, as he most certainly was not sleeping with RAQ, right? But whatever it is, he really goes out of his way here to convince Kanan that Def Con was his dad. The interaction struck me as weird, right? This dude is sitting in jail, and it looks like he's been there a minute and is going to be there for a minute. You know, what kind of nonsense is this? That your nephew comes to see you in jail, and instead of discouraging him from going down that path, you're telling him that by his age, his supposed father was out here hustling and whatnot. His father, who went to jail and is now seemingly dead, that he was out here hustling and that Kanan needs to get himself together and start earning. Absolute nonsense. Like, look at where you're sitting. Look at where Def Con was sitting. Why would you be encouraging him to get involved in this nonsense? It seems the likelihood is that he'll end up in the same predicament as you or your brother. RAQ might do some terrible things, and she's made some bad decisions as a mom. I mean, on the whole, getting involved in this lifestyle was a bad decision, but I think she's made a wise decision in not bringing Kanan around Vernon Stark, because he seems like a hot mess, just straight up ignorant. It's like all of RAQ's problems are coming at her, but she's not fully aware of the seriousness of her situation, or at least she's not letting on, right? Kanan is continuing to ask questions, now specifically clarification of why she asked him to kill Howard. She chooses to lie, but also tells him part of the truth. I've never really understood why it was such an issue with even Kanan knowing Howard was his real father. Like, she could tell him and just not tell anyone else. Though given the length she's gone to, like, try to hide this secret, I get the feeling that there's probably some other stuff at play there that she doesn't want to have come out. So she tells the truth that Howard threatened to kill her or her brothers if he spotted any of them, rather than Kanan, right? RAQ also admits that Howard was threatening to send Kanan away to prison, but states it was because of $120 rather than the bad crack he cooked up. It's like, why are you being honest about those specific details while lying about these other specific details? It goes back to her conversation with Marvin from last season about him telling one lie to cover up another lie, to go over yet another lie. And so she's told Kanan so many lies at this point that she should have just taken the opportunity to clear the slate. I'll admit that, I grant RAQ a lot of grace, as hands down that's my favorite character. She's honestly why I watch the show. But I feel like the writers set you up to break your heart. Other things in RAQ's life aren't going according to plan, but I hope that she might be able to get it together and, they'd work things out, right? So it gave me pause to see Kanan basically steal from her twice. She's got some problems with her son and also Howard seemingly turning him against her, not to mention the rest of the family and her business. Now, what does Kanan do with the money he stole from RAQ? Throws a party for the equally foolish famous. These two are so sloppy that questions are going to be asked as neither of them have jobs. First, they're selling drugs out in the corner, right, out of these cassettes with Famous's name and possibly his face on the front. And then now here it is that you throw this party shouting out that Kanan gave you the money. That info is going to get back to RAQ one way or another, which means it's going to get back. It's just drama. You're going to be in for a world of problems. Kanan is smoking. He's here hanging out with girls and whatnot. He's stepping off the stoop, right? Stuff is going to get bad for this kid, especially with that possibly pedo mom neighbor lady dropping off her daughter at the party and eyeing up Kanan. She's a perv. So RAQ is trying with this kid. I guess that's the thing about having a teenager, right? Like, they do their own thing and whatnot. Kanan continues to be a major issue for her. And the thing that annoys me about Kanan is that I guess part of it is with him being a teen, he's undecided about what he wants to do. He says one thing to her, but then it's like a different situation. Meanwhile, Howard keeps getting knowledge from his girlfriend. And I do mean girlfriend, because after 7 years of paying this woman for her affection, let's say, that is his girlfriend. She just has other boyfriends as well. RAQ is weak when it comes to Kanan, so I don't think he'll get into much trouble for stealing. Like, she's probably not going to kill him, probably. Instead, in some shape or form, Famous and possibly others are going to suffer the blowback for the stolen drugs and money. And good riddance to him, because Famous is a whiny freeloader. I don't like him. RAQ walks into their current home while checking the mail, and her back is turned as Kanan comes down the steps. I thought it was kind of weird and a bit rude that he walked past her and was on his way out the door without saying so much as hello. She turned around and seeing Kanan asked where he was going and told him to be safe. There's not a lot said in the scene, but you can pick up the vibes, right? There was like a little bit of attitude coming from Kanan. She didn't say anything to him about it right then, but like the camera was on RAQ and you get the sense that she picked up that something was wrong, right? Which leads to her watching him closely. We see that Kanan lies and tells her he's going to hang out with Famous, but he's actually going to visit Howard. He's doing his due diligence and is trying to figure out the situation for himself. As he enters the house, the camera pulls away and we see that RAQ is parked up the block and is watching them. Howard used to follow RAQ and Kanan to see what they were up to, and now she's doing the same, right? RAQ also now knows where Howard lives. So, just to keep score, RAQ got robbed twice on the same day last episode. And here she has her heart broken twice on the same day. The look of fear and hurt as she drove away from Howard's house. RAQ's life is a mess. She needs a real vacation, right? Kanan is her world and her life, but he's slipping away. Symphony seems like he could have been her future, but he's slipping away. Adult Kanan narrates that life is basically the past, present, and future fighting for supremacy. As Kanan speaks to Howard, I think some secrets are going to come out, right? They're going to be devastating, not just for RAQ, but probably for the rest of the family as well. Howard coming into Kanan's life disrupts his relationship with RAQ, and they were fairly solid until recently. What might that mean for Jukebox and Marvin's relationship, as it was distant at best, and her mom is possibly re-entering her life now? Lou. I don't think things are going to look too good for Lou's little record label situation, because there's now 2 people related to his music business that have reached out to RAQ. So the first would have been Crown, and he came to her blatantly offering her a cut of the record label to get Lou out of the business. And then here you have Cartier, who also has dealings with Lou and is sort of like starting this conversation with her about laundering money. So I think Lou's record business is going to end up being a problem here, a bigger problem. Last episode, I thought she was like completely brushing off Crown, but it might have been, as with Cartier, that she was just distracted and was trying to get back her cash. So she tabled the conversation, right? It's probably something that she's going to end up revisiting. So one of the problems out in Jersey is like getting back to the crew, right? We see people are reaching out to Lou first, then Marvin, neither one of which seems to really want to be involved with the Jersey stuff, because neither one of them is interested in doing anything about the call. So Lou brushes it off. He's got his hands full with this brewing problem and tension with Crown. And so in the midst of dealing with that, he goes into the studio, right? But the mixing board is gone. That leads to some aggression on his part towards Crown. I've said this before. It's a problem when you're into street business and trying to go legit. The way you handle stuff on the street, you can't really do in the legit world. It's not going to fly. You can't just like yoke up your business partner. That's not the way to deal with things. On a whole, his handling of Crown shows that he's not as out of the mix as he imagines. He's stressed out about what's going on with RAQ's expansion into Jersey. And then in addition to that, you now have this problem that he has with Crown, where Crown has sold off the mixing boards. My feeling is Crown wants Lou out of the business, and it's like a passive-aggressive way of making it where he can't work in the recording studio. Sure, some of it might be a matter of getting rid of their debts, but I think some of it's also buying time away, like to kind of putting Lou on pause within the business. It's obvious that there's a problem in that relationship, and it's going to end up bubbling over, right? It's another one of those things on both sides. Lou being physically aggressive with Crown, but also Crown doing like underhanded things to upset Lou. right? It's like the two of them are just stepping on each other's toes and kind of swirling around this imminent confrontation between the two of them. Turns out that Lou is kind of running low on cash, probably because he's been shelling out so much money to fund this label. But this goes to show that this lifestyle is not worth it, right? Because you take all these risks, and if like one or two things go wrong, you're back to rock bottom without any cash. How much money do drug dealers make? Because they seem kind of like broke, right, for all of this hassle. It doesn't seem like they have nearly enough money, to compensate for people shooting at you, lighting your house on fire, trying to throw you in jail. For all this drama, Lou has no choice but to go to RAQ and ask for a loan. This while he's supposedly trying to get out of the business. This 1 foot out and 1 foot in stuff is nonsense. It's like he wants to leave the life behind, but still wants to be able to spend drug money. Lou has to make up his mind, and if he wants out, talk to RAQ and make a clean break. Like, you got to give the money up at that point, right? Though I do believe Crown might have been using Lou's chess move against him by getting rid of the mixing board and forcing Lou into the position of having to borrow money from RAQ of all people to cover the expense of getting a new one. It's the same thing that Lou did to Crown to get control of the label. Marvin. When I saw Kanan leaving the prison and Marvin waiting outside, I was like, oh my goodness, here these two go again with their shady dealings. But it turns out that RAQ actually asked Marvin to drive Kanan to the prison, so she's like aware of this. Everything's on the up and up. But here we have another instance of Marvin being the voice of reason this season. You have one uncle, Vernon, being a hot mess and giving Kanan terrible advice. The other uncle, who has generally been a ne'er-do-well, is giving him some decent advice. The juxtaposition of those two scenes really shows Marvin's growth, as he was pretty much sounding like Vernon last season. That you have one uncle in one scene and then another uncle in the other. So Marvin actually makes some really good points and stressing to Kanan that, listen, you might be feeling whatever, you have questions and stuff like that. Your mom is an incredibly flawed individual, but she's there for you, right? And this is actually saying a lot. Regardless of whatever, RAQ is there for Kanan. That doesn't absolve her from wrongdoing, but I think it should grant her some grace. As expected, when Worrell reports to Marvin, his cash is short about $600. He doesn't accuse Worrell, but suspects that someone is skimming, which, like the missing drugs, might bring problems for the workers. As Marvin tells Worrell to figure out who's taking the money and deal with them, Worrell's holding cash is also a problem, right? As that's how Unique manages business, but not how the Thomases operate. Marvin also questions Worrell about why he's reporting to him rather than to Lou. At which point, Worrell tells him that while Lou is supposed to be running the 40s, he doesn't actually come around much, right? And is not on his job. I'm sure RAQ doesn't know that, but Worrell might be passing that info along to Unique. Worrell and his crew are at the 40s without one of the Thomas siblings present, and he's lined back up with Unique. Jukebox. So I was worried that RAQ and the other Thomases might have forced Kenya out of Jukebox's life. But as we see here, or rather what Kenya says, is that that wasn't the case. She was a teen mom, and much as RAQ said, it sounds like between having a baby and being with Marvin, she just couldn't deal. And so she left, but fully expecting to come back. It sounds like she got caught up, time went by, and she didn't feel like she could or it would be the best thing for her to come back into Jukebox's life. Like she explains, right, that she expected to be gone temporarily, looked up and it was 10 years later. But Jukebox is now about like 16, 17 years old. That's 6 or 7 years that they could have had together. She could have been there to help Jukebox navigate her young adult life, especially as a young woman. Fortunately, despite RAQ and her shortcomings, she is a female presence in Jukebox's life, but it's not the same thing as having your mother, right? Much as a young man needs his father, especially when you get to that age of becoming a young man or becoming a young woman, you're going to have questions as you're trying to figure out your identity, and you need that parent there to help you navigate, right? And to answer questions as you try to figure things out. Jukebox, after meeting with her mom, goes to her room at Marvin's house while he's not there, right? To get some clothes. The last time we saw her room, it had been destroyed by Marvin. It looked like a teenage girl's bedroom. But now we see that he's fixed everything up and redecorated, where it now looks like Jukebox's room, right? Pretty much it looks like an ad for Ralph Lauren Home Teen, right? Marvin seems to be making a real effort. He's accepting or trying to accept Jukebox as he is. The room has gone from being pink and girly to blue and looks more like a teenage boy's bedroom. Jukebox is home, and RAQ comes across her at RAQ's house, right? While once again looking for Kanan, Juke lets it drop that Famous has a new place. They're having a little get together there, which Kanan is currently attending. This is news to RAQ, and she seems to file that info away because Famous doesn't have a job. Juke also mentions that she saw her mom that day, at which point RAQ's facial expression just completely changes to what can be best described as smoldering. She asks if Kenya reached out to her, and Juke explains that no, she went searching for Kenya, that she'd been back in town for some time, at which point RAQ points out that she was back but hadn't thought to come looking for Juke in the years that she's been in town. It's like kind of this thing, going back to the conversation between Howard and his lady friend, where it's not enough for you to just have a child, right? You showing up for that child, you being there for that child is what makes you their parent. Rightly or wrongly, I think RAQ, even more so than Marvin, has been in the lives of these kids. Not saying she's been doing right, but she's been present. Howard's trying to make his way back into Kanan's life, and I think she recognizes that Kenya might be trying to do the same with Jukebox. And so RAQ's controlling and kind of possessive nature, especially with regards to the family. She values her family, but it's also like controlling, right? Her thing is to keep the family together, is to keep it under her control and direction, which is kind of like holding on too tightly. It's like trying to hold on to water where if you squeeze your hand, it trickles out through your fingers. She's well-intentioned, but her way of trying to hold on to the family's future and keeping things together is to exert control. That's going to become a problem, especially as Juke and Kanan are getting older and thinking and doing for themselves. Jukebox is incredibly perceptive, and I think she picks up that RAQ's demeanor completely changes during this conversation. It's going to be interesting to see what comes from that, because RAQ does not sound at all pleased about Kenya possibly being back in the picture. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my Rolling with RAQ playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media. Be sure to check back next Monday for the next recap and review episode.